Tonight, ABC 7 News begins an ongoing investigation into Lyme disease. A silent war is being waged in the medical community over a possible Lyme epidemic. The casualties? Possibly tens of thousands of suffering patients.
Just once I'd like to say to the doctor, you know what? I'm not ready for you yet. Why don't you go back in your little office? I'll be in a minute.
Just what the doctor ordered.
Two groups of doctors are pitted against each other over just about every aspect of Lyme disease, from the very definition of the illness to how it should be treated.
They are not in the business to cure cancer, to cure Alzheimer's, to cure heart disease, because if they were, they would be in the business of putting themselves out of business, and that in fact doesn't make sense.
Bill Clinton signed the Biodiversity Treaty in 1993, which says we must either reduce Earth's human population to 1 billion or reduce the standard of living to an agrarian peasant status.
When you have exposure to things like aluminum or to nickel or to lead, which is in our water supply,
What are they trying to do?
Tell us about your father. Well, my dad is the head of a worldwide evil organization with aspirations of world domination.
This is where the battle lines are drawn. On one side, doctors who believe Lyme is an unrecognized epidemic
Daddy's back.
that often needs to be treated with high-dose long-term antibiotics.
There are healthcare providers who are taking advantage of desperate patients and offering them therapies that we know do not work.
Dr. Masur says 30 days of antibiotics is enough to kill the bacteria, and those who prescribe long-term antibiotics are rogue doctors practicing unsafe medicine.
How could you do this to me on national television?
I guess he doesn't want people to see him looking stuff up. What the heck was that?
These are drugs that encourage people to remain customers.
Prince Philip said, if I could be reincarnated, I would wish to return to Earth as a killer virus to lower human population levels. He's in a position to do it.
When they put mercury in a tooth, they don't just put straight mercury, they put in tin, cadmium, and mercury together. It makes it a very stable compound. It keeps it in there for 20 years.
I don't want people thinking that I am a conspiracy theorist, because in fact, there is no theory behind what I'm telling you. It's all provable.
You're the Diet Coke of evil. Just 1 calorie, not evil enough.
You are tuned in to God's Property Radio. Here are your hosts, Sam and Dan.
Welcome back to God's Property Radio. I go by Dan.
And I go by Sam.
All right, and as promised, this is episode 4 with our no longer fully mysterious woman speaking. She did decide that she could use her first name. However, she will go by the last name Ying.
As per a silly, stupid, not so funny joke I tried to crack halfway into the interview or 3/4 into the interview. I can't remember.
I don't remember. Either way, it was funny. I laughed. But anyhow, so what you're going to find is about 3/4 of the way through this interview, I actually had to step out. I had a previous engagement for that evening. However, this was our very first in-studio interview where we weren't using a phone call or a Skype or anything like that. So it was different. It was interesting, but it was really good. Learned a lot. Lori's story is quite compelling. She has a lot of great information, a lot of great experiences.
She gives her testimony too, which is awesome. She kind of walks you through the beginning of her walk with the Lord as a young child to now. Everything in between just is such a wild ride of things she's been through.
Really, this whole interview is basically her story and what God has brought her through to bring her to where she is today with her and her family. We will say that she cured herself and her entire family of Lyme disease with the help of a chiropractor in the end. Very impressive. I know you're all probably going like, what? Yeah, exactly, guys. What?
Not just the help of the chiropractor, but the things that God put on this earth that we're supposed to be putting in our bodies.
Yes.
And subtracting the things that are in our grocery stores that are not supposed to be in our bodies.
Right. You know what? Lori actually gave a great rule of thumb during her story. She said they learned how to grocery shop. And the key to healthy eating from a grocery store, I mean, as healthy as you can, is to stay on the outer edges of the grocery store.
Right.
Stay where it's fresh. Don't go into the aisles. You got all your preservatives, all your box goods, all your canned goods. You know, you're going to get junk there. But I thought that was a really good practical piece of advice that Lori gave us.
Also, Lori is working on a book right now about pretty much what she described to us, but a lot more in depth on the chemistry.
Yeah, she's going to explain like the biological and chemical operations of the body, and not only will she be giving her story in the book, but she'll be explaining how that actually works in the human body.
And she definitely gets into that here. Her book is called From Passion to Compassion.
Compelling title.
It's pretty rad. I mean, she explains the reason for that too. I think she's working on that book right now. This is a really good episode for the ladies. A lot of the women we know that know about the NWO, and even the ones that don't really want to talk about the New World Order, definitely accept the premise that not all is well in our food.
Yeah.
So that being said, if you are a newcomer to this whole concept of the New World Order, and you don't necessarily enjoy talking about all the conspiratorial facets of, the government and policy, law, war, all that stuff,
etc., etc., etc.
This is something that affects us all because we're constantly eating. We have to eat to survive. We have to drink water to survive. And where would they go for the gold here?
Exactly.
Where would they start first? With the things you need.
If you gotta have it, you gotta have it. I mean, if the only thing you had to eat was a cheeseburger to continue living from McDonald's, it is a type to some point of nutrition. It will nourish your body. Not well at all, but it would nourish it to keep you alive.
Lori does a fantastic job at pointing out what's wrong with our food, what's wrong with our fillings, what's wrong with our children that we're passing these things to. So,
yes.
Enjoy.
Here we go.
This discussion is under the blood covenant of Yahshua, explicitly without prejudice and under reserve.
So, I was brought up in the Lutheran faith, and I want to think that even when I was really young, I had a strong bond with God, but I didn't really recognize it for what it was.
Mm-hmm.
I can remember sitting by a Christmas tree and praying certain things, and maybe having that touch of what a relationship was. But I really think as I grew up, God was somebody that was in my head, but not in my heart. I knew he existed. I knew he was bigger and over me kind of a thing, but I didn't really rely on him for day-to-day life or decisions or anything like that. Then one day I just found myself really sick. It was going on my whole life. I mean, I had a lot of ear infections as a kid. I had a lot of I always picked up the bronchial infections, and I had ear infections. Always sick. I struggled going through college. I can just remember just feeling horrible, not really knowing where it was coming from or how to deal with stress or situations. And, my mind, I knew he was always there to kind of rely on when things were bad, okay? But never, I don't think I ever really professed him when things were good. I didn't know that part of that relationship with him. Mm-hmm. And when I was really sick, it was so impactful because it wasn't just me, it was my whole family was sick. I would wake up one day and my hair was falling out, and then the next day I couldn't hold my bladder, and then I started losing my mother's phone number. Some of you call all the time, that those things just were gone for me. I even took my son to a birthday party and forgot to pick him up. I mean, all those kinds of things were going on with me. I had all the female issues, going on that women deal with yeast infections and cysts and all those things. I had to be, go on birth control pills because I bled crazily, and they couldn't control it otherwise. So, of course doctors have a pill for just about everything that kind of goes wrong with you. So I started symptom upon symptom and drug upon drug to control everything. I mean, I was always on antibiotics. I was always taking ibuprofen type thing, anything to relieve, the pain. And then my son, Ryan, was really sick. He was born as a normal child, but it had 8 ear infections in his first year of life, was on antibiotics the whole first year he was born. And then he just started having weird things happen, like toe walking and the flailing of his hands and not being able to get words totally out. And then it turned into tapping, and then he was kind of reverting back inside of himself. So, when you want to talk to him, he couldn't. And then in school, comprehension was declining. So this was all simultaneous to me. And then my middle daughter, was having asthma attacks and headaches. And she would come to the door of the house and sit down and said, I just don't feel good. So I don't know what's wrong. We were always putting a washcloth on her head just to try and soothe her. And then my youngest daughter was like a temper tantrum all the time. I couldn't understand how to ever control her. She screamed over everything. Whatever was going on, it was a scream. This all just came to like a head at the same time. And fortunately, my husband, who was also sick, didn't always have symptoms. He just had like minor things that were going on with breathing and like numbness and tingling in his hands, but he never really had any symptoms that took him down. And he was kind of our like solid rock in all this time. And we got to one day where I was just so bad. They found masses in my kidney. The memory loss was completely gone. I was bedridden. I found a vitamin. I started looking into some natural things. I found a vitamin. I can remember it was called V2000 or something like that. And I just started taking it, and it kind of gave me the energy to kind of get up out of bed a little bit. But I went to go to the business, which was 3.5 miles down the road. And as I was driving on the same one road, I pulled off into like a farm, and I just kind of had a breakdown. I didn't know who I was. I didn't know where I was going. I didn't know how to get back home or whatever. And I really don't even remember who came and got me or what happened. But that's the day that everything changed for me. I'm the kind of person, I come from, a family of divorce. And I think one of the typical things that you find in women with their that they try to control. They try to control everything because, when you control things, you don't get hurt. I got to a point where I couldn't control anything anymore. I couldn't stop my hair from falling out. I couldn't stop the pain from being there. It didn't matter what I reached for or what I went after. I would just sit with my son and cry, like I didn't know how to help him either. Mm-hmm. And so here I was, totally to a point in my life where I had to just give up. And I think if I didn't, I probably wouldn't be here today. But I did. I gave up, and I can remember being really angry with God and like pounding on the steering wheel of the car and saying, why are you doing this to me? I go to church, all the things that, a good Christian girl does. I work on this committee, I do that, I teach Sunday school, I do this, I run, I do all that. Why is this happening to me? I just finally kind of released all that, and this like warm feeling, came over me, and I just knew from that point on that something was going to change. I don't know what, but it was definitely going to change. And I tell Gary, I don't even know how I made it home that day or what happened, but he looked at me and he said, we're firing all your doctors. I was seeing 7 different doctors at the time.
Wow. Praise God.
I was seeing a urologist who called me and told me that I might have kidney cancer. Just left me like that. We're not sure. We're going to run more tests. I had 3 or 4 different family doctors looking at me. One of them said, everything that was going on with me, my hair, all that, the chest pains, the hair, they were all genetic. And, if you look at even my father's got my father had a full head of hair. And usually the women get from the man's side, I think, the hair.
Yeah, I believe that's how it works.
But my father had a full head. My brother had hair like you wouldn't believe. It's like, genetics just didn't explain anything to me. So Gary said, we're firing them all. Nephrologists, urologists, internists, doctors that just, would hand me scripts and go get this test and, never figure out anything that was going wrong with me.